Welcome to our first event of the eSearch Center, a new program funded by the California Department of Developmental Disabilities to produce a series of webinars, podcasts, and other social media communication to keep the Inland Empire community apprised of the latest autism research. I'm Dr. Jan Blatcher, Director of the Search Autism Center in the Graduate School of Education at UC Riverside. SEARCH stands for Support, Education, Advocacy, Resources, Community, Hope. I'm here to acknowledge others who supported us in producing this program. We are grateful to the UC Riverside Palm Desert Center and the wonderful folks there, in particular, Executive Director Tamara Hedges, Associate Director Agam Patel. In addition, we at UCR would like to respectfully acknowledge and recognize our responsibility to the original and current caretakers of this land, water, and air, the Cahuilla, Tongva, Luiseño, and Serrano peoples, and all of their ancestors and descendants, past, present, and future. Today, this meeting place is home to many Indigenous peoples from all over the world, including UCR faculty, students, and staff, and we're grateful to have the opportunity to live and work on these homelands. During the program today, we address the topic of research on family and teacher perceptions of autistic children and youth. You'll hear a series of 6 lightning talks, 5-minute presentations by search team members that each address some aspect of optimizing outcomes for youth with autism and developmental disabilities. After the series of talks, we'll have a live Q&A period with the presenters, myself, and the search senior staff. If you have questions or comments as you listen to the talks, please just write them into the chat in either Spanish or English. Our team will be sure that your questions are answered. You can also post them in the question and answer section as well. Now I'd like to introduce Dr. Catherine Stavropoulos, Assistant Director of Search, who will tell you about the clinical activities that we offer to the community.
Hi, everyone. Welcome, and thank you so much for being here with us this evening. As Jan said, my name is Dr. Catherine Stavropoulos, and I am the Assistant Director of the Search Center. Before we get started tonight, I wanted to give you a little bit of information about our screening clinic. Search is a free assessment and screening clinic that offers assessments, diagnoses, and written reports for children in the Inland Empire for whom there are concerns about developmental disabilities, autism, or both. Search also serves as a training site for doctoral and medical students who are interested in learning more about assessment and diagnosis and who want training in how to administer and interpret gold standard measures. If anyone has any questions about this or is interested in scheduling an appointment for their child, please contact us via phone or email shown in the slide below. Thanks so much, and we will now start our series of presentations.
Hello, my name is Alina Vatesman, and I am a graduate student researcher at the UCR Search Center. My research focuses on the parent experience during the transition to adulthood for youth with autism and intellectual disability. I will be presenting findings from the Collaborative Family Study, which is a 20-year study following youth from the time they were age 3 to now age 23. We have spent the last few years interviewing these now young adults and their parents about their experience as they left high school and entered the world of young adulthood. The transition to adulthood refers to the period from about age 18 to age 25, when a person begins to take on adult responsibilities and make important life decisions, such as whether to go to college and whether to move out on their own or stay at home. This can be a really exciting and a tricky time for all parents, but having a young adult with a disability adds to the challenges parents are faced with. So for most typically developing young adults, parent involvement generally begins to fade as their young adult leaves high school and enters the adult world. But for parents of young adults with disabilities, they might face an even greater burden to provide help and support for their young adult during this transition period. Studies have shown that parents of young adults with disabilities take on many different roles during the transition. They act as collaborators, decision makers, role models, trainers, mentors, and systems change agents. This increase in responsibilities after high school has led to parents feeling stressed, anxious, and fearful about performing these new roles. Parents' concerns during the transition period for their young adults with disabilities include identifying where and with whom their young adults are going to live, helping their young adults secure employment, helping their young adults find and enroll in social activities, and finding available agency assistance. To add to the stress, parents are forced to fill the gaps of the adult service system, which often results in confusion and concern about what role they should play in helping their young adults access these supports. As part of our research, we interviewed over 100 parents of youth with autism, intellectual disability, as well as youth with typical development about their experiences during the transition period. We asked parents what was hardest for them about the transition and what they worry about most for their young adult. And based on these responses, we identified several common themes. The most common themes that were brought up by parents across diagnostic groups, so for both parents of youth with and without disabilities, were social concerns and concerns over their young adults' independence. And that included achieving the balance between allowing their young adult to be independent and providing guidance and support. These commonalities speak to the universality of some concerns and challenges for parents during the transition process, regardless of their child's diagnosis. At the same time, several concerns emerged for parents of youth with disabilities that were not mentioned by parents of youth with typical development. These concerns are shown here with a box around them. So parents of youth with disabilities more often reflected on concerns regarding their own mental health and talked about challenges with navigating the service system. They also expressed worries about their own aging. Now, just to highlight a few key differences between parents of youth with typical development and developmental disabilities, a third of parents of youth with disabilities talked about concerns over what would happen after they passed away and who would take care of their young adult. This theme did not emerge for parents of typically developing youth. In addition, parents of youth with disabilities talked about feeling overwhelmed or having too much to handle. And they talked about struggling to navigate services and facing inadequate services. And parents of youth with typical development did not mention these concerns. So while some concerns are common for all parents, regardless of diagnostic status, having a young adult with a disability brings its own set of unique challenges. In our interviews with parents, we also asked them to talk about their goals for their young adults. And we found that parents of youth with and without disabilities reported similar types of goals for their young adults. But the specific goals reported within those broad categories differed by diagnostic group. So for example, while all parents of all young adults reported employment and social goals, parents of typically developing youth were more likely to emphasize the goal of their youth finding a meaningful career, getting married, and having a family. While parents of youth with a disability simply wanted their young adult to find a job or have friends. As illustrated by this quote right here of a mother of a young adult with intellectual disability, "I hope he goes to work and gets to be around adults his own age. I just think it would give him more opportunities of socializing with his own friends and not with my friends." So overall, these findings suggest that we need more comprehensive transition planning in high school. And that includes educating parents about the new service systems that they will interact with and encouraging parents to begin planning for their youth's future long before high school graduation. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Trisha Choi, and I am a graduate student researcher at the UCR Search Clinic. My research focuses on brain development and how the family may impact social functioning in children with autism. And so today I'll be presenting on parent perceptions of social skills interventions for adolescents with autism. So First, I will go over some background information about the study. As we may know, it is challenging for teens with autism to make friends and have good quality relationships with peers. To improve social skills, the Peers program is an intervention for teens with autism, focusing on making and keeping friends. As you can see from this photo, teens learn an array of different social skills. To name a few, teens learn how to develop and maintain friendships, enter conversations, and organize get-togethers with their peers. Parents are also involved in the Peers program and play a crucial role as social coaches to help their teens practice social skills outside of the intervention sessions. Parents are also learning to support their teen throughout the program. Following the Peers program, studies have shown that parent self-efficacy improved. Self-efficacy was defined as how much parents feel competent and capable of problem solving with their teen. And other studies have also highlighted the improvement of parent-child relationships, as well as positive parent views of their child when they directly were involved in the intervention. Behaviors exhibited by teens have also been shown to impact parents' views of their child, as well as parents' overall stress and well-being. For teens with autism, behavior challenges, including tantruming or extreme anxiety or rigidity, can increase parents' worries and affect parents' mental health as well. Therefore, we wanted to know how peers might impact family life and what behaviors teens exhibit that might influence parents' views of their teen following the Peers program. So to answer these questions, we enrolled 13 teens with autism and their parents to participate in the Peers intervention for 16 weeks. Each week, teens and their parents attended co-occurring sessions where they both learned about social skill strategies. Teens watch live role plays of peer interactions while parents watch role play videos. And you can see these videos by using your cell phone to click on this QR code in the bottom right-hand corner of this slide. Then we collected questionnaires for teens, for teen social skills, problem behaviors, and on parents' views of their teens' impact on the family. And so we found that teen social skills improve after peers, which is great. And we also found that teens' problem behaviors continued and accounted for parent reports of their teens' negative impact on the family. In other words, stress related to parents' ability to manage their teens' behaviors as they mature can become draining. This may lead to parent reports of more negative impact of the teen on the family. Thus, a potential way to improve parent views of their teen may be to combine behavioral strategies as well for their teen, as well as parent-child interaction therapy with social skills interventions.
Hi everyone, my name is Giselle Salinas. I'm a graduate student researcher at UCR, and today I'll be talking about the needs and experiences of families with school-age children during COVID-19. So just a little bit of background and objective to the study. So this study really heavily focuses on the early findings of COVID-19. So when the pandemic hit, the state of California went into lockdown. So we had this huge service disruption with the intellectual and developmental disabilities community, which I'll refer to as IDD throughout these slides. So service disruptions, we saw that within ABA, physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy for children and youth with IDD. And it really left this question of, now what? Are these families receiving services during COVID? Have their services fully stopped? So to answer that question, and you know, the main objective of today and for my study is that how has COVID-19 disrupted service delivery for regional center clients in the state of California? So to help answer this question, we used a survey that was sent via email in May of 2020, and it received a little more than 1,000 respondents. And this was sent through the Autism Society of California. And about 800 of those respondents identified as having autism. Close to 300 were grouped as other IDD, and we had about a 50-50 split between those who identified as white and non-white. So for example, for non-white, we grouped Latino, Latina, Black, Asian in that group. So here are the main findings that I really want to talk about today. So on one side, we can see amount of therapy received prior to COVID and amount of therapy received during COVID. So here in this slide, I've split up disability group and racial group. So for disability group, we have autism and other IDD. And those in the autism group prior to COVID, they reported a higher amount of therapy being received, and the other IDD group reported a lower amount of therapy received. But during COVID, the amount of therapy for those who identify as having autism was much lower than those in the other IDD group. So again, what is going on here exactly? A very shocking finding that we found out of this survey. As for the racial group, we have white and non-white. And prior to COVID, those who identified as white and non-white reported about the same amount of therapy received prior to COVID. But during COVID, we see that those who identified as white reported a much higher amount of therapy than those individuals who identified as non-white. So again, a very alarming finding that we see here, clearly showing some type of racial disparity going on. So I'll talk about a little bit more about possible reasons as to why there's these differences across groups in my next slide. So here's just a review of key findings. So we can clearly see that regional center services in May of 2020 differed across disability and racial groups. Some possible reasons are this temporary pause of autism-specific services during COVID. So a pause of autism-specific services could be ABA. So some studies have shown that during COVID, when they were trying to reinstate ABA again, some families reported that telehealth was not a feasible thing for their kiddo and their family. Some families reported that they just preferred in person, so they'd rather wait until that was available again. So that could be a possible reason as to why there was a difference across disability groups. And then for racial disparities and for the differences across racial groups was that there's already pre-existing racial disparities in overall healthcare for individuals who identify as non-white, and this could have created an even greater difference in service access during COVID. So we've seen in previous studies that those who identify as non-white have reported poorer healthcare quality overall than those who identify as white. So again, perhaps COVID could have made this difference a lot greater. And then to end on a little lighter, more positive note, there was a greater proportion of respondents who identified as non-white in the autism group than in the IDD group. So this could mean that potentially the state of California is making greater efforts at identifying autism in more diverse communities. So possibly screening autism a lot earlier and getting those family services a lot sooner. And that's it for me today. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Liz, and I'm a graduate student at the UCR Search Center. My research is focused on brain functioning and behaviors of daily functioning. But today, I want to share with you the role that siblings play in the lives of teens with autism, those who have intellectual disability, or those who are typically developing. So based on past research, we have learned that children who have siblings with disabilities have described their sibling relationship both negatively and positively. So for example, some siblings feel as though they have to act more as a caretaker or that they have to be more of a guardian within the family. But also some describe the sibling relationship to be more amicable and more conflict-free when one sibling has a disability. And so that's what research tells us from the perspective of the child without a disability. But we wanted to go a step further and understand how teens with disabilities describe their siblings. And we also wanted to understand how their parents view the sibling relationship. So we interviewed teens and parents separately, and we asked them about what they thought of their sibling, what type of relationship they have with them, and what kind of role the sibling plays in their life. So we talked with 77 typically developing youth and their parents, as well as 33 parents and teens with autism. And then finally, we also spoke with 24 parents and teens with intellectual disability or ID. And once we read through all the interviews, we noticed that these 4 sibling roles came up the most. So describing the sibling as a friend, a teacher, a source of annoyance, or a caretaker. So here's what we found, and this is just a pie chart of what the teens and parents shared with us. So in the typically developing group, most of the parents and teens saw their sibling as being a friend, so they tended to agree on this. And in the autism group, most teens saw their sibling as being a friend, and their parents tended to agree. They also saw the sibling as being a friend and also a teacher. And then you'll notice here that the autistic teens did tend to describe their siblings as being more annoying than some of the teens in the other groups. And then finally, in the ID group, most of the teens described their sibling as being a friend, and most of the parents in this group described the sibling as being mostly a teacher. And no parents in this ID group described the sibling as holding the role of a caretaker, which we found to be very interesting. So some takeaways from this work is that all the teens in every group saw their sibling as mostly being a friend, and this is very positive. So it didn't matter if the teen had a disability or not, because they were describing having found companionship with their siblings. And in the TD and autism group, parents also tended to agree they saw the sibling as holding the role of a friend. The autistic teens did describe their siblings to be more annoying than some of the other groups, and this probably relates to social communication difficulties that we often see in individuals with autism. And then in the intellectual disability group, parents did not describe the sibling as being a caretaker, which again, we found to be really surprising. And instead, they described the sibling as being more of a teacher, which we think reflects the positive parental views that parents have on sibling responsibility, and that they see them more as a peer model than a caretaker. And overall, this study highlights the importance of getting the perspective from teens with disabilities, and it also sheds light on the importance of sibling dynamics within the family unit. And as for next steps, so we have followed these teens into adulthood and we've kept in touch with them. And we would love to know if this positive sibling relationship has continued and to see if this relates at all to their well-being. So that is something that we would love to investigate next. Just want to say thank you for all the families who participated, and thank you so much for your attention.
Hi, my name is Michelle Heyman, and I'm a 4th-year graduate student in the school psychology program at UCR and the clinic coordinator of the Search Center. Today, I will be talking to you about the early findings from a telehealth model for autism screenings that we introduced to our clinic in the past year. Like other centers, COVID-19 forced us to shut down during the pandemic and prevented us from seeing families in person. However, families continue to express concerns about their children's development and behaviors during the pandemic. So we needed to find a way to continue to help families within the community. With the assistance of other collaborators, in particular Vanderbilt University, we were able to modify and change our clinic's procedures to see families from a safe distance through online or video appointments, also called telehealth appointments. During these appointments, we administer appropriate tests and measures similar to those that we would provide at an in-person appointment. Like our in-person visits, telehealth appointments determine if the child does or does not meet criteria for autism, and we are also able to gain an understanding of the child's cognitive ability or IQ level. After the appointment, we finalize an assessment report and schedule a phone call with families to review the results, diagnostic impressions, and our recommendations. Our recommendations can include services at schools or other professionals to better understand medical concerns. The main difference between telehealth and in-person appointments is the reliance on parents to assist with telehealth appointments. For example, to make the appointment as similar as possible to in-person, We asked parents to have some toys nearby and to show us similar play routines we, as assessors, would have completed with the child. Also, when some children showed some behaviors, such as not sitting in their chair or extreme shyness, caregivers were critical to help ensure the appointment continued smoothly. We also asked caregivers to provide feedback on their experience after their telehealth appointments. The next few slides will review these caregiver reports. So here's what we found. First, the telehealth appointment format allowed us to make a diagnostic impression for the majority of the children we saw. Based on the tests we gave, we were able to understand if they met for autism, intellectual disability, or ID, or if we had suspicions of another diagnosis. For cases where another diagnosis was suspected, families were referred to a provider for a further evaluation. For the few cases we were not able to confidently determine an appropriate diagnosis, these families still received a report with our results and recommendations and were offered an in-person assessment once we are able to open safely again. Secondly, we learned that many families have positive experiences with telehealth. For example, telehealth appointments eliminated the need for families to find childcare or take time off from work. In addition, families reported that telehealth appointments saved them from having to travel or commute long distances to us. We asked families to report how far their commute would have been if they did see us in person. Their responses ranged from 0 to 120 minutes, with the average commute time being around a half an hour. Overall, caregivers reported that telehealth had worked and had time and travel-related benefits. Caregivers also reported that the telehealth process was easy to follow and that the technology was easy to use. We use Zoom in our clinic, and many families were familiar with this platform as they use Zoom for either their work or for their child's school. They also reported that they could easily communicate with the search team and were able to collect important information about their child. The majority of the caregivers also reported that they would participate in another telehealth appointment in the future. At the bottom are some quotes from caregivers, overall expressing that the process was easy and also preferred. The pandemic forced our clinic to change its procedures to continue to help families within the community. Telehealth was shown to be helpful during the pandemic, and it has shown it has benefits that can continue to be helpful even when the pandemic comes to an end. Online appointments help us see families who live far away from the clinic or families who are not able to take time off to bring their child to the clinic for an in-person appointment. I hope this provided some information about our clinic. If you are interested in any of our services, please contact us and I would be so thrilled to speak with you. Thank you for your time.
Hi, my name is Katie Fullerton. I'm a PhD student in special education at UCR and a graduate student researcher in the Search Center. Today, I will discuss the strengths and challenges for young children with autism from parent and teacher perspectives. As you may know, children with autism often experience difficulties in social interaction and communication and have restricted, repetitive behavior or interests. These symptoms can affect how these children view and respond to the world around them, as well as how they build relationships with the people in their lives. In early childhood, the relationships that children form with their parents and teachers are powerful. That's because these early attachments lay the foundation for long-term development. In this research, we were interested in learning about the perspectives of parents and teachers regarding the strengths and challenges of young children with autism, ages 3 to 7. We used a widely known measure of behavior problems, and on this measure, we were particularly curious about how they would respond to 2 open-ended prompts. What concerns you most about the child, and please describe the best things about the child. Based on the responses to these questions, we investigated the themes most important to parents and teachers. That is, we looked at if they valued the same strengths regarding the child and whether they worried about similar matters. Here are some of the top 3 concerns from parents and teachers and representative quotes for each. While parents and teachers were both most concerned about their child's social skills and behaviors, including their ability to make friends and ability to stay on topic to have a conversation with peers, they differed from there. Parents were most concerned about co-occurring issues, including behavioral issues like noncompliance and tantrums, physical issues like nutrition and eating problems, and emotional and mental health issues like anxiety and depression. Parents were also concerned about their child's independence and adaptive skills, including self-care skills, safety skills, and inclusion in society. As may be expected in a classroom environment, teachers were concerned with academic skills, like achievement, performance, and engagement. Next, they were concerned with speech and language skills. Parents and teachers had the same top 3 best things about the child, but the order differed. Again, both teachers and parents agreed on social skills and behaviors as number 1. This would include being socially motivated to make friends, having positive relationships or interactions with peers, and having back and forth conversations. Mood and personality traits, such as being easygoing, lovable, and honest, were more often endorsed among parents. Again, as may be expected in the classroom context, the cognitive processes, like having a different perspective and cognitive functioning, were often more endorsed among teachers. So, in this study, we explored prominent themes that arose in response to 2 open-ended survey items among teachers and parents on the most concerning and best things about children with autism. Interestingly, social skills emerged as the most frequently reported concern and the best thing about the child with autism from both perspectives. So what does this tell us? First, this tells us that although social behaviors of children with autism are often thought of as targets of change or intervention, they can also be celebrated as strengths. Second, while many studies show that parents and teachers can have starkly different perspectives, they may have similar views qualitatively. Ultimately, this is so important because these perspectives have the potential to move away from a deficit-based approach, giving parents and teachers the opportunity to highlight positive characteristics that may serve to alter mindsets and strengthen relationships. Strong connections between students and teachers enhance student performance in the classroom, social skills, and peer acceptance. Strong relationships between parents and children promote healthy attachment, skill development, and increased parent involvement. Needless to say, we are excited by these prospects for our young children with autism. Thank you so much for listening.
Okay. I think we'll now open up this session for questions and answers. If people want to put them in the chat, that would be great. Otherwise, you can use the raise hand function or put your camera on and physically raise your hand. I have one question here for our very first panelist, so maybe I'll kick it off with that. Let's see. I think our panelists were going to identify themselves and their role. But while they're doing that, I'll throw the first question out to Alina. Alina, my child is in middle school. What steps can I take now to prepare the transition to adulthood?
That is a very good question. So I would say just starting to plan for the transition while in middle school would be the best first step. So starting to think about what are your goals for your child after they leave high school? Are you hoping that they go to college? Do you want them to move out on their own? Are you hoping they become more independent? And just starting to plan based on those long-term goals would be the first step. And then identifying agencies that might be of assistance. So if you're already a regional center client, starting to ask your regional center case coordinator what kinds of services exist for adults, what kind of programs, vocational programs exist out there. You can also ask your school if you have an IEP or an individualized education plan at school. That would be a good time to start talking to your school psychologists and school administrators about what they suggest in terms of transition planning. So is there a transition program in the high school? Or is there some sort of agency that the school has collaborated with in the past? So just kind of starting that plan and figuring out what the goals are would be the best first step, and then arranging services based on those goals, whether it's social skills, independence, educational goals, employment goals, just kind of starting to go that path or as early on as possible would be my recommendation. You're muted, Jan.
I said, thank you, Alina, and you raised a very good point. We usually associate the phrase, the earlier the better, with early intervention in very young children. But I think what your research is telling us and what you're telling us is that to optimize outcomes, beginning early for that transition out of high school is also important. Early preparing for the transitions into school and out of school seem to be equally important. I'll stop for a moment and see if anyone wants to ask another question, or I'll read through ones we've already received. It's a quiet group tonight. Okay. Michelle, here's a question from a listener. Can you really capture aspects of autism through telehealth?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what we can do, the short answer is yes. And what we have been doing is we've been using activities or using specific situations where we can maybe elicit behaviors we would associate with autism through telehealth. And so by doing that, we make it as similar as possible, like I said, as in-person appointments. And so by doing that, we are able to then capture behaviors we can associate to autism, or maybe see behaviors that are maybe not associated to autism, to help better identify maybe concerns that families might be having.
I think one of the things people don't realize or recognize with telehealth is you also get the chance to observe the child in his or her own environment or home, which provides different information that one might obtain in a strange clinic or a doctor's office or a center. So I think that's a great point. Checking the chat here. Tricia, someone wants to know what behavior strategies I or she can use with what behavior strategies can I use with my child?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So this will kind of depend on the behavior that you might want to focus on or improve upon with your child. But some general strategies that you can use are things like a visual schedule to improve transitioning behaviors between activities with your teen. We're also
también halagar o felicitar, halagarlos cuando ven un
to see continue. So making sure that they're getting that positive reinforcement and that you're praising them for doing a good job with what you would like to see.
That was a very succinct answer. Thank you, Tricia. Since you brought up the issue of behavior, I guess the one question that I have that's similar would be for Katie. Katie, this parent wants to know some ways that, what are some ways I can improve my child's relationship with his teacher?
That is a really good question, because I feel like sometimes parents feel removed from the classroom and like can't really have an impact on the student-teacher relationship, but that is not the case. Actually, having a positive parent-teacher relationship is really helpful for the student, because you know your child best. You are this wealth of knowledge, and the more that you can impart to the teacher about those strengths that I talked about in my talk, things about the child that can help personalize that relationship. Also, just coming together can help. You both want what's best for the child. You both want the child to succeed. And so problem solving together, sharing effective strategies and things like that will help things go smoother in the classroom, promote that closeness and warmth between the teacher and the child. And so communication is key, and that parent-teacher relationship.
Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. We have a question here for Liz. The question is, what are some tips you can share if my child with autism finds their sibling annoying?
Well, that is a very good question. I will say that what we found was that it wasn't just the teens with autism who found their siblings to be annoying. So all the groups did note that a little bit, just to varying degrees. And it was just that our autistic group found their siblings more annoying when you compared them to other groups. And I say that because, that just normalizes that sometimes siblings don't get along, especially when two of them are teenagers. But some tips for if they are, feeling annoyed with each other and you're seeing increased levels of rivalry, it's really important that when you see the siblings getting along, that you always, always let them know that you're so happy to see them playing well together or sharing a certain toy or object, because we know through research that positive reinforcement is really effective. Also, it might be helpful for your teen with autism if they have a cool down space in the house. So when, it seems like maybe arguments are starting or there's certain, you're noticing that they're not getting along, you can suggest, hey, why don't you go to your cool down space and, take a minute. And in general, I think we know that it's really effective for teens with autism to have really clear rules and really, regular routines that they can also do within the house. So those are some tips for when siblings are maybe getting a little bit annoyed with each other.
That was a very helpful comment. There's another question that I think I will throw to Yasmin, Dr. Beloria, and I think this will be.
Sorry to interrupt, Jan. I think the telehealth one is one that we wanted to ask to Michelle and Catherine, if you don't mind.
I guess I didn't see that one. Go ahead.
Sure. So it says the use of telehealth observations brings up the question of whether it would be a good idea for parents to record problem behaviors as they occur for an expert to later view or discuss. So Michelle or Catherine, if you wanted to answer that question.
Michelle, why don't you start first, because your presentation was on telehealth, and I know that we recently have had experiences with this in the clinic, and then I'm happy to jump in.
Yeah, no, that sounds good. I wasn't sure if you wanted to take it first. So I think there are definitely positives of recording video of your child, especially for telehealth and sometimes even for in-person assessments as well. We are only with the child for about 1 to 2 hours, so it's hard to capture all the behaviors or all the, really behaviors that your child does throughout the entire day. And so we, as Dr. Stavropoulos has mentioned, we did have a recent case where we asked for videos actually to just kind of really understand the child's behaviors in different situations or with different people so that we can give a more thorough clinical diagnosis or a clinical impression to the family. And I'll have Dr. Stavropoulos add to that.
Yeah, I think Michelle hit it exactly right. I agree. I think there are definitely times where especially if a child is displaying really angry behaviors and might not want to speak to the assessors, or is very sad or very anxious or any other sort of co-occurring behavioral issues that make it hard for us to assess them and get an accurate picture of kind of who they are and what might be going on with them. I think that's when video is super helpful, because it can kind of shed light on what they're like day to day. Because as Michelle said, we only see them for an hour. Parents see kids 24 hours a day for years, and parents are the experts. So especially if parents feel like there's a reason that we're not getting a picture of who their child is, I think that's when videos can be great.
There's another question in the chat that I'm going to throw out to the entire search team, and anyone can take it. This person says, could you suggest resources for online teachers of students that may have intellectual disabilities, but the parents do not want to start an SST evaluation or have an evaluation with special ed professionals or a pediatrician. So this is an online teacher and has a student that may have ID, but parents are not interested in starting the evaluation process. What resources might we offer that teacher? Or suggestions?
So I think one of the things that we might be able to suggest without knowing more about the child or the child's needs is really to help kind of build the relationship in the classroom. And we keep going back to that because it's so important to build those early student-teacher relationships. And so actually the Search Center, along with our research team from the Smooth Sailing,
nuestro equipo creamos una guía de recursos para ayudar
teaching in online or remote classrooms. And a lot of the strategies we recommend here, again, go back to connecting with students in various ways. So I'm going to go ahead and include this document in the chat box if anyone wants to download it. But a lot of the methods come down to trying to have one-on-one interactions with the child and, if needed, with the parent as well to help support those one-on-one interactions. So that could be, you know, through Zoom or whatever platform that's used in the classroom. There's also, you know, strategies like celebrating student success. So anything that the child is you know, their strengths or their talents, things that they enjoy doing, I think can be celebrated by the teacher and also in the classroom. Doesn't have to be in a one-on-one setting. And then promoting peer interactions. There are some really strong games and fun games that have been published online for use for teachers or in different kind of group settings. So they can be used in small groups or classroom settings. And these games really do help promote, you know, social or peer interactions. So I'm going to go ahead and drop this resource guide, like I mentioned, in the chat box. And if anyone else wants to provide some other strategies that this teacher can use in the online platform, that would be great.
I'll add one other thing a teacher did once, and she shared it with me, and that was to invite the parent to come and visit the classroom, and the teacher structured an interaction, maybe a reading group or whatever the situation was, and invited the parent to observe her own child or his own child in the context of the other children. And then it became a little more apparent to the parent that some evaluation of the child would be called for. So that's an additional strategy. Here's a question, I guess, to the panelists. It may be appropriate for Katie. Which of the positive traits of children with autism mentioned by parents and teachers was most surprising to your team?
So there were many, but I think the biggest one was the social skills coming up as the best things about the child, because children with autism often have some difficulties with social interaction, social engagement. And so the fact that it was coming up so much as the best things, they're so sweet, they really are empathetic. I think that it also changes just the mindset, and it shows that it's not one size fits all, not every child is the same. Also, there were some that were things that could be considered typical autistic traits, such as getting lost in an activity or being fixated for a long amount of time. And that could be considered like a restricted repetitive behavior, but from these teachers and parents, it was put into this light that was a really big strength. And I think that's so important to have that perspective and to change something that could be considered a challenge into a strength. And I saw that a lot in some of the responses, and it was really, really positive to see how they supported the children. Thank you for asking.
It's really nice to emphasize recognizing strengths instead of challenges. I have one more question submitted for Giselle. What should I do if my child has not received services since COVID began?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think that's a common question a lot of parents have. So a big start would be to contact the service coordinator or case coordinator if you are a regional center client, and they would most likely do a reauthorization to get your services reinstated. And that might take a little bit just to get it reinstated, but most likely that's something you'll be told. And if your child is enrolled in school, I would most likely contact the school and ask about the previous services and to see if they can also reinstate those again or see what's available. And if you do have insurance and you were receiving services through insurance, I would also contact your insurance and see if they can reinstate those as well. But yeah, great question. Thanks, Jen.
We'll give our participants and attendees one more minute to ask anything else. I guess if not, we can draw this session to a close. Yasmin, do you have any final announcements about where people can get resources?
You read my mind, Jan. I was just going to say, we do have a list of resources on our website. Again, I'm going to drop that link into the chat box. So please feel free to explore those. And if you have any other specific questions, based on this event or otherwise, please feel free to reach out to us via email. Let me drop our email in the chat box as well. We are going to have another event at the end of the summer, so please stay tuned. We'll be sharing that event information with you probably in the next couple months. So stay tuned for that. And I think, Catherine, you might have another announcement.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thanks to everyone for joining us this evening. I know that throughout the last year, we've all been very Zoom fatigued. So we really appreciate you all spending an hour of your evening with us today. And we hope to hear from you via email or phone.
Have a lovely summer.